Hi everyone. I felt like I had to create a new guide for the Ignite Trickster that I created with Fireball and Flame Wall because I didn't feel like the guide that I created yesterday really justified the build. The build is so strong and I really recommend you trying it out. So to begin with, I will go over the details of how the build functions while showing you videos of conquerors dying. Then I will go over the gear that I recommend and how to switch to CI if you want to play CI or just play hybrid. And then lastly, I will go over some leveling suggestions. Okay, so just stay tuned for the showcase videos. So we have a Maze of Minotaur map here. You can see the Minotaurs very buffed. You have reduced curse on him. He has more life, more attack speed, more damage, and it's a 44% pack size map. The good thing about showcasing this map as well is because it's a delirium map, so you can really see that the damage just works throughout the map. So Fireball applies on Ignite, and the Ignite on Fireball is like so powerful because it's 95% more damage with Ignite. It says on the gem at level 20 or 21. So that's what we're using and scaling mainly. And you scale on Ignite with fire damage. You cannot scale Ignites with spell damage, sadly. And you scale it with damage over time multiplier, and since it's an ailment, you also scale it with ailments inflict faster damage. That's mainly what you're going to be looking for: skill levels, damage over time multipliers, and ailments inflict faster damage, and fire damage, and burning damage. The second skill we're using is Flame Wall, and that applies a burn like Righteous Fire, so that's not an ailment. And you can actually scale that with spell damage, but I wouldn't recommend stacking too much spell damage since it doesn't work on the Fireball. But what it also does is apply a secondary debuff that deals a bunch of damage. Like mine is 2 million, so when my Fireball passes through it, my Fireball deals the Ignite damage and the secondary burn damage as well, so that totals like 4.5 million single target DPS on my Fireball. And then we use an Elemental Equilibrium by applying it with a Storm Ball. And I use Wave of Conviction on the boss to reduce the fire resistance that they have, and then lastly I apply a curse with the Flame of Conviction because it has Hex Touch and Flammability. So remember, this Minotaur had extra life, 50% extra life, almost extra attack speed, extra damage, and like 70% reduced curse on him, so that's why he feels so very tanky. And you will see when I fight the Conquerors, it's Awakening level 8 Conquerors in the next videos, how big the dot damage is. It's so insane. I can really recommend you trying this out. It wasn't very hard for me to build, but look at this damage on burn. The burn damage, it's so insane. And it's the same on all of the bosses. This is one portal, all of the Grandmasters that I did. I just rushed the map. It took me like 4 minutes to complete. And then we have Roxia. Insta-phase him. Sadly, I cannot skip the phase with damage over time. But even though he's in this immune phase, he almost just insta-perishes and insta-dies from it. And now there's Hunter. Big damage as well, as you can see. I can really recommend it. And the thing about the Flame Wall as well, you can clear Elemental Reflect maps with it. I spawn a map now and then which has Elemental Reflect. And then I just clear with the flame wall instead of shooting the fireball. So you can see here the dot damage on Cirrus is actually quite high, but because he teleports around so much and changes form all the time, it doesn't stick to him. But you can see here he really lost some life quickly. Damage over times ain't the best for Cirrus if he skips around all the time, but if he moves a lot, then it's very good. But if he keeps doing some other stuff and changes form, then you lose your burn every single time, or your damage over time with the toxic rain or whatever. So the Searing Touch is a no-brainer for this build. That's the best in slot piece of staff that you can get. You can craft some rares that are going to be better, but it's near impossible because your weapon cannot have any added fire to spells. If it has that, then it will break your elemental equilibrium that you get from the Malachi's Artifice. These are the two mandatory uniques, so to speak. Other than that, it's just rares. So when you start with the life build, you will just look for life and resistances on the gear. And then slowly when you transition into CI, you will of course craft with dense fossils. And then you can choose different sets of gear. So okay, the staff is Searing Touch. One of the rings is Malachi's Artifice. You will look for as high lightning resistance as possible because you will insert a Orb of Storms into it. The armor, I prefer a 6-link carnal armor. They're usually cheap when you get into the league. You can start out with a tabula and then try to get some sort of 6-link if you're playing live version, but if you're going for the CI version, I recommend using carnal armor. It's way easier to get the colors that you want on this. And you want 4 blue, 1 green, 1 red if it's for the flame wall, and if it's for the Searing Touch, then you want 2 green. No, if it's for the fireball, then you want 2 green, 3 blue and 1 red. For the Hubris Circle, live version, just life and resistances. For the CI version, you want as high energy shield as possible. You can craft this 25% chance to avoid elemental ailments. I really like having elemental avoidance on my builds stacked to 100% so I can have some other mods on my flasks than being immune to freeze and burn and shock. I use a combination of the boots and the helmet, and then a cluster, as I will show you later. I just bought the ring as the last thing to make my resistances the right. So I'm Captain Fire and I'm Captain Cold. I just bought whatever I needed with as much intelligence and maximum energy shield as I could get. I also looked for mana regeneration because shooting fireball, it costs 100 mana each time you shoot it. So you will really need to get some mana regeneration, otherwise you won't be able to sustain it. You don't need to shoot it all the time, but it's when you're clearing maps, it's nice to shoot once in a while. On the bosses, you actually just need to apply the ignite, and that's it. So for gloves, you can use some hunter gloves with 16% damage over time multiplier for fire. And you just craft these by either using pristine if you want life, or dense fossil and then scorched fossil. You craft this with dense fossil. And if you're going for CI version, I recommend getting a crystal belt that's Crusader influenced, that you can craft with dense fossils and try to get the flat Crusader mod. It really helps a lot with getting a bunch of energy shield. Otherwise you can use Baited Breath which is special unique. I don't even think that I have it. But it's baited breath. It looks like this, and it grants a bunch of energy shield. But the bad thing about it is that it doesn't grant any resistance, and it's kind of hard getting resistance up when you're using Malaka's Artifice, because it only grants 100 lightning resistance, but then it reduces all your resistances by 20, so you get 80 lightning and minus 20 to all the other stuff. The amulet is kind of tricky to craft, but what you do is that you take a hunter amulet with +1 intelligence and a warlord amulet with +1 to fire, and then you combine them by using an awakener orb. So what I did was that I bought the base that I wanted. I wanted this blue pearl amulet myself because I really needed the mana regeneration. And I bought that in the warlord influence because that was cheaper than trying to look for a hunter that was this base. And then I put on resistance catalysts, so I could try to slam for resistance if there was a free suffix, as this one had, and I hit lightning when I slammed it. It wasn't that good, my slam, but still, I had catalysts on it before I started crafting it. So when I crafted it, I was just using scorched fossils on the warlord influenced, and I just kept on using scorched fossils until I hit +1 to all fire skill gems. And then I made sure it was the only warlord mod. As you can see here, it says warlord in the fire skill, and there wasn't any other warlords. Then I bought a hunter amulet, I level 82, and I just used alterations, orb of alterations on it, until I hit +1 intelligence gems. And then I combined them by using the Awakener Orb on the Hunter first, and then transferring that mod onto the Warlord. So the gem setup, you can see here with the Fireball. I use Fireball, then I use Ignite Proliferation support, Combustion support, Awakened burning damage. You can just use burning damage. It's just a very big multiplier because you also get 10% fire damage over time multiplier. Then I'm using Awakened Deadly Elements. That's also a big upgrade because it has this damaging elements inflicted with supported skills deal damage 10% faster. And then greater multiple projectiles. For single target, I use Swift Affliction, and it grants me about 1 million extra. So I just swap out the greater multiple projectiles and swap in the Swift Affliction. For the Flame Wall, I use Phantasmal Flame Wall, and that's because it inflicts fire exposure. And Swift Affliction, Awaken, Elemental Focus, Efficacy, Control Destruction, and Awakened Burning damage. The thing about the Awakened Burning damage is that it's usually very cheap. On my boots, I use Wave of Conviction with Flammability and Hex Touch. I'm about to level on Awakened Hex Touch so I can add another curse instead of the Void Spear, but I'm using Void Spear right now, but I want to add Elemental Weakness Curse. I use Malevolence and Discipline and Clarity. I really need the Clarity. You need the mana regeneration. And then Enlighten. Early, when your life version and you don't have that much energy shield, then you obviously don't need Enlighten, and then I recommend using Fresh and Stone instead. So you blind the enemies that are near you and you take reduced damage from projectiles. In my Flame Dash setup, I use Second Wind and Arcane Surge. When you're leveling the build, it's very good to use Smoke Mine, so you get increased movement speed. And then I use Stone Skin on my left mouse button, so I activate it once in a while. And the reason why I use it on my left mouse button is that I'm not quick enough to actually put it on in all the seconds just when it matters, so it just gives me some sort of mitigation now and then. It isn't that important, to be honest. So going over the leveling. When you level with life, it actually helps getting some acrobatics. So you can dodge, and then you will have like 4 to 5,000 life and maybe 1 to 2,000 energy shield. You won't. It will be very hard to get more than that. So you need to have some sort of dodge to stay alive. But what you will do is that you will go up here and to cold-hearted calculation, then lethal assault. Then you will fight Mervil often. Then you go up and grab growth and decay. And then you grab coordination for the cast speed and some extra stats. And you also get the strength here from Blood Siphon, that helps a lot as well. Then you can take no witnesses if you want some extra movement speed while leveling. And now you just want to rush as fast as possible over to Holy Fire, because you want this chance to ignite, and this grants you 25% chance to ignite. And when you get these two combined with combustion support and the leveling on the fireball, then you will have around 95% chance to ignite. So what you do is you spec here and here, over to Deep Wisdom through Heart and Soul, Arcanist Dominion, and then you can take Firewalker. And then you take Elemental Overload for some extra damage, and then up to Holy Fire. Then you can spec this way over here, and take Heart of Flames, and take the life notes here as well. And then you can just grab whatever life notes that are near you. You can grab these life and energy shield notes, and you can grab Breath of Flames cluster here. And then you can go down here and grab Discipline and Training life and the Holy Dominion and some life here. When you've done that and taken the Purity of Flesh over here as well, that's very good as well, because it grants some chaos resistance and some more life. Then you have a choice to make after you've done this. One is that you can either go down here and take the quick recovery as well. I would take the quick recovery so you get some mana regeneration rate. But then you could either go take Constitution, take Shaper, so you get some more mana regeneration and life regen, and get the entire Seared Life Will cluster. Or you can go down here and take Acrobatics and Face Acrobatics, and then go through Herbalism and down to Wind Dancer and Thick Skin. So it's either over here or over here that I would recommend doing. And try to get the clusters as fast as possible. They're very easy to craft. The only mod that you really want is Burning Bright. So you just use clusters on it, Scorched Fossil, until you hit Burning Bright. It will take like 5 to 10 attempts, and then you will have it. And you will also maybe get Cremator, that's a prefix alongside Burning Bright, or Smoking Remains. And then there's a suffix like Widespread Destruction that will be placed in the outside as well. So Burning Bright will always be placed here, and then the other prefix up here, and then the suffix down here. But you want the medium clusters as fast as possible. And Blowback is very good. Circling Oblivion is okay. While Reinvigoration is also good. And then I've listed a bunch of notables in the Path of Building in the description. I can't remember all of them, but I've listed them in rank so you know what to look for. And it's important that you have options, so you can just use some Scorched Fossil until you hit 2 notables that you think you have, one strong and then one decent. That's fine. And then you can choose to use these small 1% chance to dodge attack hits so you can get elegant form. So I have 30% chance to avoid elemental ailments here, plus 35, plus 25, that's 90, and then I get the last 10 here. That makes me immune to elemental ailments like freeze and shock and burn and sap and all of them. Otherwise you can get 35% on the body armor crafted and 25% on the gloves, so you have some options to get it. Otherwise I suggest just using a regular jewel in them. It takes so many points to spec out to these extra life notes, extra notes out here, so just put in a jewel so you can get some immune to corrupted blood or onslaught or damage and shield. I like using poacher's aim. I get it from Act 5 and it really helps with your fireball clear when you start clearing with the fireball, because then it pierces the first target that you hit. For Watcher's Eyes, there's this damaging ailments you inflict deal 30 damage 10 to 15% faster, but the damage over time multiplier from malevolence as well actually grants more damage. I just picked this one because it was the cheaper option of the two. Yeah, for Flasks you want to be bleed immune, you want to be curse immune, and you want to be freeze immune. So if you are immune to elemental elements, then you don't have to be freeze immune anymore, and then you can either use extra evasion rating. I always recommend getting movement speed, and then cast speed also feels great. And when you go into CI and you don't need to use a life flask anymore, then you can add a jade flask. But I recommend using quartz flask with quicksilver, granite, and basalt, and then you can use this jade flask when you're immune to when you're going CI. Okay, that was actually it. I hope you enjoyed the guide, and I'm sorry that I disappointed with the first guide and that I actually misled a bit. It was because I recommended some Templar gloves that added fire to burning targets, and that totally messed up the Orb of Storms applying elemental equilibrium. So all the damage in my showcase videos were so low compared to what they are now in what I just showed you. So when you level, you want to use Flame Wall to kill the monsters. You just do this firewalk as I'm showing here by casting it by your feet and keep running, then the monsters will walk through it. And then you use the fireball on single target and on some rares if you want to kill them. You can see here that the damage on Piety is actually pretty huge. I have suggested support gems in the note sections in the path of building, so just look in the note sections where and what supports you should use when you're leveling. Look, she just died so quickly, so I can really recommend also leveling with them.
Damn you!
Okay, that's it. Have a nice day. Talk to you later. Goodbye.